This is the Gaza Strip. Compared to some cities or regions, look how small it is. The war between Israel and Hamas in recent weeks has mainly taken place there. In today's video we retrace the history of the Gaza Strip and understand how and why an organization like Hamas was born within it. A premise: this will be a concise video, which however will necessarily simplify some dynamics and which will not unlock every minor event. This is the first of our geopolitical series, in which we will cover a lot of current and past geopolitical events. So enrich the narrative in the comments, but always with respect and education. To understand what is happening now, we need to understand what are the past events that made all of this happen. Let's begin. The Gaza Strip is a strip of Palestine facing the Mediterranean, 41 kilometers long and between 6 and 10 kilometers wide depending on the points. In total it has a surface area of approximately 365 square km, more or less double the size of Milan, and many people live there. Before the start of the conflict there were approximately 2,200,000. This part of the territories together with Cisjordan does not have recognition by the UN. The concept of the Strip as a territory dates back to 1948. While the city of Gaza has an ancient history, so much so that its name appears several times in the Bible. It was probably founded in the first half of the second millennium BC, and over time it was occupied by various peoples including the Egyptians and Philistines. In the 7th century AD it was conquered by the Arabs, and gradually the population learned the language and converted to Islam. At the beginning of 1500 it was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. After the Ottoman Empire and after the First World War it became part of the British Mandate of Palestine. In 1948 various Arab countries and the Arab component of Palestine attacked the newborn state of Israel, considering it illegitimate, and the territory of the Strip was occupied by Egypt. It was precisely then that the concept of the Gaza Strip as the separate territory emerged, because it was the only stretch of the Mediterranean coast of Palestine that Israel failed to conquer. Before and during the 1948 war the crawling encounters a huge demographic bomb. In fact, approximately 700,000 inhabitants of the territories occupied by Israel were forced to leave their homes, and most of them took refuge in nearby areas including Gaza. Various refugee camps were therefore set up in the Strip, initially composed of tents and later of brick buildings in which the descendants of the refugees still live. The area remained under Egypt until the Six-Day War of 1967, when it was occupied by Israeli troops, and after which the construction of Zionist colonies began in the area. Here we remember what Zionism is in brief. It is that movement born at the end of the 19th century which aimed to establish a Jewish state in the Palestinian region. This is where we can trace the origins of Hamas, an acronym which means Islamic Resistance Movement. In short, it is an organization that fights for the autonomy of the Palestinians while imposing the principles of Islam, and which today is considered terrorist by the European Union, the United States, obviously Israel, and other countries. In fact, it has carried out and carries out attacks and military attacks against the Jewish state. After the Six-Day War and the Israeli occupation of the Gaza Strip, the movement that later gave rise to Hamas spread in the area. It was called an Islamic Center and was a social welfare organization. Moreover, an offshoot of another organization, that of the Muslim Brothers, born in Egypt in the 1920s. Initially the Islamic Center was not involved in politics and was not seen badly, not even by Israel. But in the 1980s the situation changed. The Strip continued to remain under Israel in the West Bank. Zionist colonization continued, and so the first riot broke out in the Palestinian region, that is, a vast revolt, and the Islamic Center decided to support it. For this purpose, Hamas was established in 1987, which was supposed to be a sort of military branch of the Muslim Brothers in Palestine. At the time, Palestinian politics was dominated by Fatah, led by Yasser Arafat, who followed a nationalist and secular political line and who still controls the West Bank today. Fatah had undertaken a peace process with Israel, but Hamas did not approve of this line. Thus he began to attack Israeli military targets, but at the beginning he began his actions especially against the Palestinian Arabs accused of collaborating with the Jewish state. At the same time, however, it also deals with social assistance by establishing canteens, hospitals and services for the poorest Palestinian Arabs. In the 90s the parallel peace process had its effects and the Gaza Strip was ceded by Israel and the Palestinian National Authority, a new fact-driven political body. However, Zionist colonization did not stop, as did the attacks and massacres of Hamas, and the Israeli government thus built a barrier around the Strip, leaving only a few crossing points open. They did it obviously for safety reasons but end up effectively isolate the Gaza Strip in the band. However, not only Palestinian Arabs lived in the area, but also around 9,000 Jews in 21 settlements created after 1967 that Israel had to manage and protect. It therefore remained until 2005 when the Israeli government decided to dismantle them and relocate the inhabitants. After 5 years of ferocious clashes throughout the Palestinian region called the Second Intifada, Hamas in the meantime changed its strategy, and in 2006 participated for the first time in the political elections of the Palestinian National Authority. Surprisingly, the movement emerged victorious at the expense of Fatah, the other party. And the success was due to the population's distrust of the PNA. Hamas' social activism and the way in which the organization conducted the fight against Israel. By the way, the Jewish state reacted to the success of Hamas by imposing a total naval blockade against the Gaza Strip which continues to this day. After the electoral victory, a very chaotic period began and in 2007 a sort of civil war broke out between Hamas and Fatah. But how did it end? The Islamist movement took power in the Gaza Strip while, through the PNA, it retained control of the West Bank, which, let us remember, still remains partly occupied by Israel. Since then the state of tension has been continuous. Hamas and other Palestinian militias frequently launch rockets against the Jewish state, which shoots them down through the Iron Dome anti-missile system. But it responds above all with aerial bombardments. These unfortunately also cause less innocent lives, but it must be said that in the past Hamas members have sometimes hidden in civilian buildings to try to dissuade Israel or to put the state of Israel in a bad light. Today the Gaza Strip remains surrounded by the barrier built by Israel on which there are some controlled gates. However, over time, Hamas has created an intricate network of underground tunnels that allow it to smuggle goods including armaments with the outside world, especially on the border with Egypt. Then there remains the Israeli naval blockade which begins a few miles from the coast, prevents exploitation of a gas field discovered in 2000 and fishing beyond a certain distance from the shore. The most dramatic situation concerns the conditions of the population. Most of the inhabitants live in dilapidated buildings and services including healthcare. And the supply of water and energy are extremely lacking. According to a 2021 report by the Home Population Bank, lives below the poverty line and the unemployment rate exceeds 50%. In the Strip they also reach international users, but according to Israel and its allies they are entirely and partly used by Hamas for its activities. On a political level, in fact, the Strip remains controlled by the movement and the government is de facto separate from that of the West Bank. Armed militias are active in the territory, such as the Ezed and Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. But also the Movement for Islamic Jihad in Palestine. The two entities are considered terrorist organizations by Israel by various Western countries, but enjoy some popular support. In fact, many inhabitants of the Gaza Strip consider Israel responsible for the conditions in which they live and have a strong desire for revenge. Be careful, however, there are also many other Palestinians who are profoundly opposed to the methods and ideology of these organizations, especially in the West Bank. That's all for today. Now that we know the history of Gaza, we are ready to better understand the next video, which will be about the actual conflict. Until then, have a nice day. Support our effort and commitment by liking, subscribing and sharing this video.